Just doing my thing.
Thank you for tuning in to the Voices C38 podcast. I am your host, Brendan Wyatt. Joining me today in studio is Brian.
Aloha!
Via Skype, we've got Austin, the Drunken Monk.
Greetings.
And a special guest appearance, Mark, the Rapids Rabbi, if you follow him on Twitter. He happens to do a lot of work with the Burgundy Wave. Thanks for joining us, man.
Shalom, my brethren.
Welcome. In today's cast, if you are new to our format, part of our starting 11, we will look back at the, I don't know.
Despair, disappointment.
I was thinking of a word that started with D. Because the D just totally fell apart as far as the outcome of that game. When it comes to Vancouver, you would think that we would have had that 3 points, but we didn't. We would have had the 3 points at two different times, but they failed on that aspect. So we'll elaborate a little bit more on that. As far as our news part of the broadcast, Austin's done a little bit of work on Mark Birch, so we'll get some details on that.
That just didn't sound right.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how we roll, you know. And then FIFA 17 is now available to play, so we might touch a little bit on some FIFA stuff.
We will accept sponsorship, FIFA.
Yeah,
FYI.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we will look forward to the home match against Portland coming up on Saturday.
Protect the dick.
Yeah. You
couldn't get that out earlier.
I
either.
couldn't. Yeah, it's just something about protect. I can't seem to just get it out. Maybe I need some more beer. All right, gentlemen. I'm going to leave the forum up to you guys because I was away for the game.
All right.
It was a bye weekend for me as far as everything goes. So
should have been anyway.
Yeah.
It was terrible, but I wanted to see Pablo turn around, grab his sword, chuck it up into the stands, and yell out, "Are you not entertained?" Because this is what everybody's been asking for. More than a goal in a game.
If by everybody you mean yourself, yes.
Two worst offenses in the second half of the season, and they put up 6 goals between the two worst offenses in the league for the second half of the season.
So that's good and bad, though.
Well, yeah, but that's my point. A lot of people were wanting a lot of goals. He gave you goals. He gave you 3 goals.
Pablo didn't give you 3 goals. The Rapids did.
Defense.
Gashi did.
Gashi gave you a brace, which first time for Gashi getting a brace. Now, granted, one was off of a PK, but we cannot take anything away from that stellar free kick. Any thoughts on that, guys?
No words to describe.
The free kick was poetry. It's like the best part of the game. It's fun to watch on the Rapids Twitter feed. It's fun to watch how they are so cheery, optimistic all the time. So that like a really disappointing 3-3 tie is spun by the team into being like, hey, look at this goal. It's like should be goal of the week. Vote for goal of the week. It's kind of like. Yeah, that's true, but like you kind of broke my heart in a 90-plus minute like meltdown.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was an amazing goal. It was an amazing free kick goal. I never get too excited about MLS vote on goal of the week because if you're competing against one of those other teams like the Galaxy or the Red Bulls or Seattle, they just bring so many freaking fans to it. You're going to get crushed.
Yeah, it's kind of like the MLS All-Star voting.
Did make the top 10 list in across the world on I can't remember which.
Well, Sports Center had it.
Yeah, I think it might have been Sports Center, but someone had him up, and they're like compared to even other leagues that are supposed to be better than the MLS.
That's because it was replayed on Albanian TV all day.
And Albania is actually creating a holiday around this kick.
Free Kick Friday.
Yeah, poetry is a good way of putting it. I mean, it was definitely.
Although, did you see Alonso's goal against LA?
No.
Wow.
Well, we'll see who wins goal of the week. But,
Exactly.
Unfortunately, like he said, when you're facing up against a guy who's from L.A. or New York or Toronto or somewhere where there's a bigger fan base, but
nobody else knows where Colorado is, let alone that they have a team.
No, they know it's the place they change planes in.
Right, Denver, that hub at DIA.
And
it does nothing but snow here.
Yeah.
Hey, it was snowing where I was at all weekend, and I was enjoying it. Just saying. But back to the game part of it. To give up 2 goals when you're ahead, this has definitely got to be something that
and up a man
and up a man too. That we can't
for 2 of those
forget about that red card, and it was justified for sure.
Yeah,
but
which, by the way, timeout on that.
Yeah.
Good on Baji for getting himself in that position, getting behind Boston.
Baji has been very talented about getting himself in proper positions.
Yeah,
Baji's problem the last few games is actually finishing those positions.
He's progressing though, which I like.
But the factor that he's showing dangerous helps us.
Yeah.
Because even if he's going to miss 5 out of every 6 shots, you still have to worry that he's going to get that one on you. Like he's just always seems to be burning past their defense, and they're going to have to start taking him seriously, which allows people like Gashi, Doyle, Latou, Papa, somebody else to have one less person marking them.
We've kind of needed that though, and we were talking about it in the pre-show prep about the difference between Doyle and Baji, not necessarily in that aspect, but they're different types of players, and if I were Kevin Doyle right now, I'd be a little worried about my starting spot, just due to what we were just talking about with Baji being able to get into dangerous spots, and he's making opponents and the opponent's defense worry. We haven't. I mean, when we chatted with the Orlando guys back in a month ago or so, one of the first things he sat there and said was, "Your offense doesn't scare us," and to hear that. It's brutal, honest truth. Our offense doesn't scare anybody. And if you want to go far in the playoffs, you need to have an offense that scares people. Now, granted, our defense scares people, but our offense doesn't. So
I mean, it did till this week, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something else about Dominique. You're seeing more of him. I like the partnership he's kind of getting with Marlon on the field.
It's the young guys, man.
Yeah, they look for each other. They play off each other.
Could you swing him out left? Could you swing Baji out left, put Gashi in for powers, and put Doyle up top, and let Marlon and Baji play off of Doyle and still have that chemistry? Or does Baji have to be in the middle of the field to allow him and Harrison to interact better?
I think he's got to be closer to Marlon.
I agree. I think he definitely does need to be somewhat kind of close, kind of like, we mentioned FIFA a little bit, so those who play the Ultimate Team know about the chemistry lines between a player, and there's definitely a chemistry line between Marlon and Baji. With Azira out, foreshadowing a little bit into our pregame stuff for this weekend.
You'll love this, Austin.
Powers is going to move back into the defensive role. So
wait, there's always the opportunity to move Watts forward and put someone else as a central defender.
Not with who's available right now.
We don't have anybody.
No.
Piss me off. Pablo might do it.
No, there isn't another center back to take that place. Burling is still dealing with a turf toe.
Yeah, it's different, but
he's not available to play, and he won't. So don't be surprised if you don't see anyone available as far as center back on the bench this week.
Nothing against Watts. I still think he had a decent game last game, minus his one poor clear.
Well, it seemed like
really clear.
Let me ask you guys, because you watched, but it seemed like the issue was more with Mark Birch this week than it was with.
That's part of the reason I'm breaking him down is because he has been solid all season long, and really basically most of his career. He's been solid, and he just had a bad game. He left his mark on the last 2 goals that he just and. Granted, Watts had the bad clear on that last one, but it's hard off your head in certain positions, so I'm not going to hold that entirely against him. It's not like he was trying to just kick the ball out. He's up in the air, he's trying to head it out, and your defense, especially the best defense in the league, should be prepared for a kind of shoddy clear off of a head.
Well, let's be honest. They made a complete mess in front of the goal in both those plays anyway. So
Yeah. But both those marks were his.
Rabbi, your thoughts?
I don't know if you can blame it on one guy. I mean, that's what this defense has been built on, is communication amongst 4, if not 6 dudes, and they were just a mess.
Yeah. I agree. I'll do the defense thing, and I want to go back to the Baji Hairston chemistry thing, because that was, you guys nailed it on that one. But yeah, it was a total team meltdown on defense in a lot of different ways. My take is that some of it started all the way at the front. You know, the team likes to press up top high, and that works if you're going to put pressure on the ball and keep the ball back, or you're going to make it hard to thread through the defense. You know, the wings didn't really succeed at pressing, and when they didn't succeed at pressing, balls zipped, 30, 40 yards up the side with no resistance. What that then caused was it seemed like both the defensive midfielders got pulled out wide, and they had to kind of compensate. And then suddenly they're out of position, and the middle of the field opens back up. So you got they just really exploited the Rapids by getting the balls up and towards the 18-yard box and then whipping them back across for guys like Bolaños and Giles Barnes to capitalize on. So there were those things. I don't think there's a single player that I saw in any of the defensive areas who really covered themselves in glory. I thought Mark Birch actually was the least terrible of all of them. There were plays where and Eric Miller also was doing pretty good, but he was basically being asked to like bail guys out who had really screwed up. There was that play that you're talking about, that second goal. Sam Cronin kind of just got blown by, and then you had 3 guys collapsing on the box on the ball, the guy with the ball. Yep. And then there's an unmarked runner. There were actually 2 on the second goal. There were 2 unmarked runners coming through the box, and it's because the whole team.
I don't think it was Birch's fault. Those are his marks, and if you're going to put blame on a specific player, which I don't like to do, you put it on the guy that's supposed to have his mark.
But is that a ball even Howard should get?
For sure.
Right. Getting that's a good question, because one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because all I saw was the 8-minute highlight, and that second goal, I wondered if Howard really he didn't give it as all, it looked like, and you kind of have to wonder, is that something that Howard should have got to? I mean, no one seems to be blaming Howard for anything at this point, and is that because he's Tim Howard, or is that because we're looking at the defenders and blaming them instead?
To blame a keeper in most situations, because that means 10 other players failed to do their job. We did ride McMath pretty hard, though, at the beginning of the season, but I think
DC.
In this instance, there's a difference between a keeper making a mistake that is an obvious keeper mistake versus a keeper like Howard, that it's something Howard could have gotten to, but could a regular keeper have gotten to? And every once in a while, he's not gonna be able to be Superman. And so every once in a while, things are going to get through on him, and
I think that's the problem. Fans are going to expect Superman
not being him, or is it
every time?
So I don't know. It's really hard. I think that he might have been able to get to it, but once again, would 80% of the other keepers be able to get to it? Probably not.
I don't know, man. I saw some things in training that made me think, God, Zach McMath, he's gonna end up somewhere next year.
And he's gonna kill us.
Exactly. And
he's a beast, and we said it on the cast for the second quarter of the season. We said, "Hey, McMath's showing up. He's stepping up. Was and probably still is one of the better keepers in the league." And Howard's coming in, and we're going to lose a younger keeper that is going to probably flourish at some point. Now, we can only hope that maybe he ends up in a different league.
Yeah.
Or at least the Eastern Conference.
Right, the Easy East.
Yeah.
So, any other final thoughts looking back at that game as we wrap up the starting 11?
I know the Rabbi wanted to talk about Baji Harris.
Yeah.
I'll do that, but I think back to your point, it's hard. I agree with. I think it was Austin who said that it's hard to blame a keeper, but if you're going to blame anybody, I mean, you could blame a lot of guys. A lot of the team didn't quite put it together, but if you're going to blame any one person, it's Marco Papa, who came on and promptly spent a tremendous amount of the last 10 minutes losing the ball. Marco Papa is your dribbler who's going to do really good things and hold the ball. And he kept seeming to want to dribble onto goal with the last 10 minutes to go instead of dribbling into the corner. Yeah. He lost 2 balls in the final 5 minutes. First one didn't hurt us because we got it back, and the second one wound up turning into the tying goal. I know Marcelo Balboa talked about it on Altitude, but Papa hasn't quite been giving us what we want of him in the second half of the season.
My problem with blaming Papa, which I agree, here's the problem: he's not being a team player, but at the same time, he's a player that they brought in and has been a starter and all-star player, and he's getting spot minutes, and this is a guy that's trying to prove why they brought him in. And so when you always bring him in with 7 minutes or less in the game, it his mentality is to go on goal. That's his natural mentality. That's why he started. That's why he's a great player. And you're bringing him in to waste time like that. I think that's more of a problem for me than him trying to dribble around and go on goal. Yes, he needs to be a team player. He needs to focus on the team. But at the same time, why are you bringing him in to be the time waster when you might have other options, or actually play him some substantial minutes and give him an opportunity to do what he does?
Yep. To the good that the Rapids have figured out a lot of good chemistry, like you guys mentioned. You can see it when Baji and Hairston, when one feeds the other. In the last 4 or 5 weeks, when one of them has had a goal or an assist to the other, they jump into each other's arms. There's this look. There's a lot of passing between them. There's a lot of 1-2 play where Baji knows that Hairston's going to want that ball on a diagonal into the box on a 1-2 after Baji's kind of broken through. Those kinds of little moments, they just have a sense of working off each other. There's a third guy who was doing it earlier towards the middle of the season, and it was Mikel Williams when he was playing right back. He had really good overlap chemistry with Hairston, and unfortunately it didn't last because he made some defensive errors in a couple games, and I think he got replaced by Miller, which I don't think is a bad decision. But
I prefer Miller. I like Williams, but I actually prefer Williams if you're going to play him in a 4-4-2 as your winger.
They're all boys.
No doubt, but I don't know that I've ever seen a game with Baji up top, Miller and Hairston both on the right side, and it might be fun to watch.
So I don't know if you guys have heard this,
question
but
brought to the Twitterverse. If you were going to debate, do you think Baji or Hairston's hair weighs more?
Well, it's pretty obvious whose weighs more, but
no, I meant Baji as a whole,
as a person,
or Hairston's hair.
That's a different story. That's a good call. We could take some guesses on
soaking
that.
wet or dry.
But Brian had made a comment. Just
faster would Hairston be if he didn't have any hair, like all of us?
I don't know if anybody would recognize him.
Stop it.
But Brian had made a comment just a second ago, kind of under his breath a little bit, that Baji, Hairston, and Williams.
Yep.
The three of them are like 3 peas in a pod.
Yeah, they're boys. They're 3 amigos. They do
outside off the pitch. They have some chemistry, some camaraderie. They're boys.
Yeah.
But you're right. As far as Williams' spot in the starting 11, he did lose that to Miller, and Miller, he's a grinder, man, and I think that's one of the main reasons why he's earned that spot. Is because we know how Pablo likes certain players who grind out and work hard, and that's Eric Miller. And
it's dangerous. It's dangerous, and I would love to see it because the attacking power of Williams running over Hairston while Baji's up top would be insane. Like our right side would be very dangerous, but then you are sacrificing that right side very hard on defense, which means you're going to have to be really compensating for that, because if you really want that trio to work, you have to let Williams be very offensive for a defender, and that leaves you open.
Right. That's where you would almost need to push Axel onto that side and kind of hope that he can pick up the trash. So that kind of almost pretty much wraps up the starting 11.
How many minutes are we in, huh?
We're 20 minutes in.
That's
so
got that about right.
Yeah, based on our regular starting 11, that's about where we're at.
Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome, Matt. Just kidding.
So, newsworthy stuff. Austin, you've broken down Mark Birch.
Him too.
Yeah. Let's hear what you got, man.
All right, so Mark Birch is 32 years old. So he's a little older than I am. Born in Cincinnati, Ohio. How many soccer players have come out of there? Let's be honest about that.
There's a few.
He went,
Marlon.
Yeah, they can't.
Yeah, was it Marley who played at Cincy?
He played at Louisville.
He played at Louisville.
Omar played at Cincy.
That's who it was.
Just throwing that out there.
Okay, anyway.
So, his college career, he started out at University of Evansville. He made all Missouri Valley Conference 3 years there before he transferred over to University of Maryland, where he scored the game-winning goal for the national championship. I know. He was picked up in 2006 in the draft by LA Galaxy in the second round, 24th overall. But he was traded
Fumble.
Sorry, guys.
Where he spent the rest of the year, and then he was sent to DC United for 2007 through 2011. He was switched from striker at DC United to the left back position he currently plays, where he has basically stayed the rest of his career at DC United, and then in Seattle for a couple of seasons, I think. And then he switched over to the Rapids in 2014. He played 21 games in 2014. They picked him up in the re-entry draft. That was the second time he'd been picked up out of the re-entry draft. He had 3 assists and 1 goal that season. So that's not terrible for a defender. 2015 didn't go so well for him. He only did 8 starts. But in his 8 starts, 3 of his first 4 starts were clean sheets. So that's got to be something that he's doing right there. And then this season, he has 23 starts out of 24 games played. He has 2 assists, 2 shots, 1 on goal. And I'd like to point out, for Brian's sake and the rest of the our listenership, is that 2 assists ties Kevin Doyle and Powers.
Nice. 2
offensive players that are supposed to get assists.
They're too busy defending.
Yeah, is that it?
That's it. Well, and you had stated that on FIFA he was rated at 65.
Which I think is honestly a low rating as far as
especially
FIFA
since you
goes.
said Powers is at 70. Come on.
Yeah, Powers is at a 70. So we can kind of talk a little bit more about Mark Birch and then bring it into some FIFA. For me, I feel like Mark Birch is a really solid left back, and that's what he is. Like, I hate to compare him to Marvell Wynn, but I'm gonna.
I was a huge Wynn fan. I really was. And my wife, it's her favorite player of all time.
Well, mine too, partially because he wore 22, and that was the number that Tammy follows. So, it doesn't really matter because now she's a Nazira fan. So it really just kind of, so maybe it's the ladies, whether, you like someone based on looks or the number they wear.
Well, my wife was a defensive player, so she loved Wynn because she liked his style of defense.
All right, so there's that. It's hard to tell what a lady may think, and I mean that in a good way. It's just we can't always figure it out. What I saw with Marvell is I felt like he was a 2-dimensional player, and with Mark Birch, I feel almost the same way. He doesn't have the spin Marvell has, or the speed that Marvell has or had at that point. But with Mark Birch, he's very solid as far as defensive goes, and he's got a wicked left foot. Like, I don't know if you guys have paid attention or no, but there are certain times where, depending on who's on the pitch, Mark Birch is the one taking the free kicks, or depending on the placement of the free kick, and it's because of that left foot that he's got. So he can be a threat at times, and we spent a little bit of time earlier dogging on him about some of the misplays and misplacement and what may have cost him.
That's the first time this season I've really seen him have a really bad game, in my opinion. I think that's why I brought it up. Like, that's why I wanted to break him down. This is the first time you've seen some real weakness out of Birch, and whatever the reason that was, who knows? But he's been solid all season. He just, as you said, he's just solid. He's just a left back,
right? And you need guys who can play their position. And sometimes you don't always need 11 guys on the field who are box to box and can play anywhere or run up and down the field. That's kind of what sets certain players apart, is how well they play their position. And I think when it comes down to left back, there really isn't anyone who can play left back like Mark Birch can.
No.
I agree with you about the foot. I mean, he took some free kicks in his in 2014. I think he had a goal, or if he didn't, he had something that looked. He had some balls that were just pummeled. He hits the ball so hard. He just kicks it so hard. He's got also an accurate cross, but his ability to hit it is remarkable. Back on May 24th, I wrote a piece for Burgundy Wave that was all about Mark Birch, because he almost single-handedly won the game against Seattle. And I just wanted to, it was one of my favorite things that I wrote this year, so I just wanted to read a little bit of it to you guys.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, please.
Mark Birch is a damn peasant folk hero. After this game, ballads were written of his legend in small villages across the Slavic hinterland. When battling Mark Birch in a massively multi-online role-player game, you must roll a 99 in order to survive an encounter with him. Mark Birch actually runs MLS's Central Office of Man Bun Approval. No player in the league may sport his signature hairstyle without expressed written consent from Mark Birch himself. If the U.S. had had Birch in 1941, they could have dropped him over a Japanese city and ended the war immediately.
Yeah, man, I have to agree with that analogy. I mean, he definitely, when he's on his game, and it's no surprise that it was against Seattle, the guy is definitely difficult to deal with and to get through and around, and most teams aren't going to think about having to defend a guy like Mark Birch. It's more about how to get through him. And that kind of that's what makes him a little bit more than two-dimensional, is because he does have an offensive ability, and whipping those crosses in, and that's kind of what sets him apart. And that's really, I think, between Eric Miller's work ethic and Mark Birch being solid in general, that's what's keeping Mikael Williams on the bench.
I think he keeps a lot of he takes a lot of teams by surprise. They don't expect. They expect to be able to gain ground over there, and it just doesn't happen. So,
let me bring this up just as a thought, because it popped into my head. It's no secret or surprise that certain people are going to be protected in this upcoming expansion draft. Would you protect Mark Birch?
Yes.
That's one from Brian.
Yeah,
what about you guys?
You're only
one from Austin.
True left back. You got to keep him.
Rabbi, what do you think?
I'm trying to remember what I wrote, because I already did this article, but I feel like the odds are low, because part of what you're doing when you're protecting is trying to gauge who is most likely going to be picked by another team. So you basically say to yourself, with only 11 keeps, everyone 30, 31, 32 and over, you just leave alone. You don't protect. You protect. You protect the guys who are young. Might be something.
What's up?
So, Mark picked up twice in re-entry draft. Granted, the last time was in 2014, but I think people might notice I think in this next draft, you're going to see a lot of people noticing our defensive players that we leave out because we've had such a solid defense. I think if you would look at years past when you have an okay defense, those defenders will get left out. But this is a guy that is, in my opinion, should be noticed if he's left in the re-entry draft. If you're looking to shore up your left back situation,
He'll get taken.
Yeah. So you think he'll be unprotected?
No. I'm saying if he is, he'll get taken.
Okay. See, now we were standing out at training today, and one of the things that came to my head was they're not going to protect Papa.
Nope.
Which they shouldn't. If Pablo's not going to play him, there's no point.
But part of me feels like Birch would be part of that starting 11 that he would protect.
I mean, because who else? If you lose him, then who do you put over there?
Mikhail.
I'll give you my list. So I have
He's
the
more
Rapids players that will be protected are Cronin, Gashi, Howard, Schoberg, Azira, Baji, Berner, Burling, Powers, Watts, and Williams. I'd say if there's anybody on that list who's likely to drop off the list and swap with Birch, it'd be Williams for all the reasons we already talked about.
So
I don't know.
Why do you
I might
have
actually
Burner
say
and not
Burling.
McMath?
I think McMath is a player that is gone. There's no way you keep him. And I think he's probably so unhappy being the number 2 on the bench that he doesn't even want, I would guess, that he wouldn't even want the team to protect him in order to be able to transfer him for a fee. The Rapids are going to need to, I mean, it's possible, but I think Powers is in almost the identical situation, which is I'm not sure Powers wants to stick around another year of being sort of kind of maybe with the team. And I don't think the Rapids can carry 2 guys who don't want to be with the team and protect them in order to then try and sell them on. I think you can only do it with one, and my guess is they would do it with Powers.
I can't argue that.
I almost feel that you should give up Burling over Williams, only because he's been so injury prone this season. That do you really want to keep that around? Like
I
he hasn't
think
had enough time to play.
There's also
our
an
team-
age thing that plays to that too, because when you consider if you know you're looking at your list and your roster, and you're looking at Burling versus Williams, it's nothing against Bobby because he's been good when he's been good, but he's also been injury prone and off the roster at times. Whereas Williams, he carries an international slot, which is a little different.
Bingo. That's
And
what I
I
was gonna
think
say.
that's what might hinder him. And, I mean, he still plays for TNT. He's going to keep playing for TNT. And there's something there. But the difference is can we use him? And if we can't, then, who do you go to? Because, to what we, alluded to in the previous podcast with Jared Watts and the breakdown that Austin did then, Watts is turning into a pretty relatively decent center back. So whether we use him as the number 6, which is what Parag Smith wanted to, use him for in the beginning of the season, and is what you guys give me shit for over and over and over about, or do we use him as a center back, which is basically what Pablo's been doing? It kind of you have to look at our depth, and when it comes to our depth, I'd want to keep Williams around.
Have a replacement for Burling that's 75-80% right now of what Burling is, and Watts is still pretty young actually. So give him another season, and he's going to be solid. And it's really hard to replace a left-footed player, let alone a left-footed defensive player.
Yep.
Anybody regret not picking up Brendan Vincent?
I mean, I do, but that's just because I had a real soft spot for him, and also because we don't really, and I got to sit down with Pork and talk a little bit about how they made these decisions, and one of the challenges of being a fan of MLS is the lack of transparency means that we don't really exactly know how much allocation money got swapped in all of the many deals the Rapids did around the draft. So we don't know how much money they got for that slot. I love Brandon Vincent as an idea. I don't know that he's been as spectacular as everybody hoped he'd be this year. Keegan Rosenberry's really been the draft pick, fullback pick
Absolutely,
of the
yeah.
draft. And I think he went either 3 or 4. So I don't know. I miss him, but our experience with the draft this year was as we say in Yiddish, bubkis. We didn't pull anything off the draft this year, which it happens from year to year.
I like it, bubkis.
Well, because I think our focus, and it needed to be, was picking up real players, not drafting players. Because first, Pablo is terrible with young players for any young player, and you really, in my opinion, shouldn't be drafting old players. If they're good enough to draft, they're good enough to be on a team. But we needed to focus on signing some really solid players.
Speaking of
and
new signings,
that's where our focus needed to be, because
What do you got?
we have been terrible for 2 years.
So, yeah.
We may have a new signing in a couple weeks, guys. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name's Jermaine Jones.
So, I mean...
Keep your eyes open.
Playing this weekend. I saw him out at practice, right? There was a picture of him with a UFO and Jimmy Hoffa's body.
And Sasquatch.
I believe.
Yeah, with Jimmy Hoffa's body. Now, today we witnessed Jermaine Jones participating somewhat in training, more than he has in the last 2.5 months, to the point where...
Or
He actually wasn't just running
playing
circles.
ball boy, or was he actually touching a ball?
No, he was touching the ball, and he was moving.
We saw foot to ball.
Yeah, we saw foot to ball a handful of times, and so we know, based on a conversation Brian had with Bobby, he's definitely a few weeks out, and his turf toe and what he's feeling is hindering him. But when you look at, and this is hard to explain unless you've kind of been out to a Rapids training and you've seen how the nursery works, and I'm using that as a Oscar Pereja term.
Oscarism.
But there are certain players, obviously, who are recovering from injury, and they don't partake so much in full training. And Jermaine Jones has been wearing a blue penny at times, which is basically non-contact. And now, granted, we didn't see that today, but what we did see was him touching the ball and making movements on and off the ball and working. And he was working with Bobby Burling. And then at the end, it was him, Bobby Burling, and Kevin Doyle. So don't expect to see Kevin Doyle this weekend start. He may hit the bench. And if Kevin Doyle hits the bench, then that kind of tells me Jermaine Jones is further along than what I expected. But I still, in my opinion, exactly. In my opinion, I still don't see him until we make that playoff push, which, that can go either way. Does that say that our coaching staff feels like Jermaine Jones can help us go through the playoffs as soon as he's available and ready? Because he's still not training with the team, but he's touching the ball, which is...
Rest instead, do you put him in early if you've already, hopefully, clinched a playoff spot, and take the chance that you put him in too early and he's back out for the playoffs? Or do you wait and you go, first playoff game, you wait till after that October 23rd game, and you go, look, we've already clinched a playoff spot, let's rest him that game, not put him in, or maybe bring him off the bench for Papa time, and let him get like a small amount of time and let him really rest, and then have him come out full strength in the playoffs.
I think you got to have him get a little bit of time, at least against Houston, for his own mental fortitude, so he's comfortable.
Yeah, I think as a player, you still want to be able to get out on the pitch and play in a game, especially before the playoffs. Dropping a guy like Jermaine Jones in, I mean, yeah, granted, he's got a lot of experience, and he's definitely a veteran in this league, but he's got to have some minutes before the playoffs. You just don't want to drop him in. And that kind of leads me to my segue, because I brought up FIFA with it being released on Tuesday. I'm going to run off some FIFA ratings on some players, and you guys tell me if you think they're accurate or not. So as far as their starting lineup goes, they've got, basically what you would think would be the best Rapids team. So in the back, you've got Howard, rated as 78. Then you've got Miller. He's rated as 66. Joberg, 71. Burling, a 68. But recently, based on Burling and his injury stuff, so you got Watts playing in his spot. Watts is rated at a 65. And then you've got Mark Birch rated at a 65.
Low.
That's your back five. Then Sam Cronin's rated 70. Azira's rated a 69, which I think is a little low. Just saying. Gashy's is 74. Jermaine Jones is a 73. Marlon Hairston's a 66. And Kevin Doyle's at a 70.
What's Badgie? Does it give that?
65. So, and then on your bench, you got Williams at a 65. Powers at a 70. Baji's is 64. I was wrong on that. Baji's 64. Dylan Cern is a 65, which I shake my head at a little bit. And Papa's at 69. So
maybe they got Powers and Cerna confused because their names were Dylan. Hey,
that's part of your repair.
Nothing against Powers. If you're playing Powers in a proper position, I think he's a decent player. But is he 5 points better than some of these other players that are getting 65?
Mark Birch.
I just don't see it.
Mark Birch is either one of two, or the only player who last season in FIFA 16 made the FIFA Ultimate Team of the Week. Fun fact. And when they do that in foot mode, they issue another version of the player with a higher value, and I feel like he came in at a 74. So they have amnesia, is what I'm saying, because they kind of rated him really low after last season, saying he had an amazing game and he rated really high. So I'd say that he's a crying shame on that list. And Marlon Hairston, was he a 65? You said?
No, he's a 66.
Oh, 66.
Yeah, that's a crying shame. That's just not. I mean, just on his speed alone, he could be much higher on that list, and his passing is really good.
Actually, his passing is the highest rated out of everybody on the team, next to Eric Miller. He's got an 81 passing percentage versus Eric Miller's 82.
The other thing he does really well is tackle. I mean, he tackles in the open field high really, really well, which is, I think, why he has basically earned a virtual permanent starting spot for the Rapids. He high presses, I think, better than almost. I think the thing that makes Gashi and Hairston, kind of locks to start in this team is they high press really, really well. And I think that it doesn't seem to be reflected in the FIFA numbers.
Not at all, considering when you look at Hairston's defensive rating, it's a 58. And you mentioned Gashi, he's at a 55. And, I can kind of see Gashy's defensive rating that might be semi-accurate because we've seen him not work off the ball as much as some of the other players. But when you consider Marlon Hairston...
Well, might bench him and put him in for Papa minutes if he doesn't defend.
Well, Papa's defensive rating's at a 50, but for me, I feel like... Yeah, exactly. that it is a little bit, but... I wanted to ask you guys, do you think that spending a year in Charlotte as a left back helped Marlon Hairston when it comes to what he's doing now?
Yeah, I think he needed the time.
I think just being in Charlotte, period, yeah.
I feel that Baji might have been able to do really well if he'd had a significant amount of time out there too. I think we're getting a lot of growing pains out of Baji. He showed really well in the last few games, but I think he'd be doing even better technically if he'd gotten a little bit more time on the field somewhere else, maybe.
So
yeah, I would agree with you, except that the guy who was taking the spot in the lineup off of him was Gabriel Torres. So, I mean, on one level,
now he's crushing it where he's at.
Yeah, that's a thing. He loves Panama, doesn't he? He does really well in Panama.
He's
nowhere else.
Where he's at, we let Rivero go. Rivero did decently his year after we let him go. Like, maybe we're just terrible with our number 10 players. Which
I was going to say, wearing number 10 in Burgundy might be a bit of a jinx. You know,
we could bring Messi in, and he'd probably put him as a central defender.
He probably would bench him, as far as we know.
He'd be like, "You're not a hard enough worker, Messi. Can you please sit the bench, or we'll put you in for 2 minutes, and just hold the ball in the corner. Don't go on goal."
Speaking of guys who spent some time in Charlotte, Caleb Calvert is back, and I'm going to start. I'm driving this train, man. I drove it in the beginning, and
yeah, we're going to see a lot of him.
I'm still sticking to it. You're going to see more of Caleb Calvert than you thought, and what I saw at training, and what I've heard from some people who've been at training more than I have, Calvert he's in form right now, and don't be surprised if we don't happen to see him come off the bench on Saturday over Doyle.
Oh, I like him off the bench. I think he's great off the bench. I think he brings an offensive spark that I only think the only two other players which should be starting would be Hairston or Baji, or before Cerna got injured, Cerna would have been one of those where I was like, there's certain players that just come off the bench and they bring energy off of the bench. And that's the kind of sub you want to make at the 65th minute, is someone that comes off the bench and just brings a ton of energy. And there's players that don't do that. Papa doesn't do that. Doyle doesn't do that. Some great players that are very talented just don't bring that kind of energy off the bench. And I think Calvert does. Calvert brings a ton of energy. He works hard. He starts shooting. He comes out like a firecracker.
I don't know if Calvert's ready, but I think the great thing about Calvert is he's 19 years old. He's got, if he's not ready, we could be very excited about him and say, he should start. If he doesn't start this year, if he doesn't start next year, if he doesn't start the year after that, he's still really young, and that's great. The question is whether the Rapids can hang on to him until he's developed.
Exactly, and you and I both have spent some time with Parg Smith, and he'll be one of the first ones to tell you there's something about Caleb Calvert and what he can bring to the table. And they see the potential in this kid, and don't be surprised for those who haven't been paying attention that there's something about this kid.
It's so exciting to see, and the problem is that we don't have Perea anymore, as much as I hate that fucker. He was great with young talent, and the Rapids have a lot of young talent coming out. You got Cerna, who's 22. You've got Watts, who's who's 24 or something. He's still pretty young, especially for a central defender. You watch him grow in the next 3 or 4 years, and you keep him. You have a solid central defender to kind of captain that back line, especially after you lose Howard as a keeper in a few years. You've got Calvert coming up. We've brought up Manny Spinney.
Yeah,
we would love to see him get some time. You just got a lot of these young players that, if the Rapids can keep them, can make our future team, which is what I really like to look forward to. I like having a great team right now is awesome, and we needed it because we were terrible for 2 years. But I want a team that's going to continue to be a good team, a competitive team. Do I expect us to be top of the league? No, but I want us to continue to compete for playoff spots and be top 4 or 5 or 6 over the next few years, and even after that.
The problem with us with young players is structural, which is without having a USL team to send guys to. We get a couple slots at Charlotte, but we can't build out a Los Dos like the Galaxy can or a Sounders 2. So we don't really have a place to stash U23s. I talked to Brian Crookham about
looking.
Yeah, I talked to Brian Crookham about this, and they're aware of the problem, and they have some interesting workarounds that they've thought of, which is great. But, as it stands, without having a place to stash and develop young guys like Calvert, we're kind of more of a buy and sell team than a hold team. And so that's a thing that they're aware of. They kind of have to deal with. And I think the Rapids are eventually going to have to adapt that starting around 2018. For now, it's pray to God we can hang on.
That's how other leagues do it, though. And that's what I want to see. That's the MLS's problem. is that thought process. What you need to do is find a system that truly grows young players where you can put them somewhere. That's why it's great to have relegation, which, I'm not sure how I'd feel about the MLS having it, but having things where you have a bunch of leagues under you that you can work with and put younger talent in, or even teams in your own club to work with, will drive talent in the MLS, because it's not about buying talent from somewhere else.
So do you
it's
guys,
about your own.
based on this little bit of conversation, do you guys feel like the reserve league or the reserve part of it will make a comeback?
I hope so.
Or would it be something where, like it's been talked about with USL and NASL promotion relegation? Which would you guys rather see happen? As Brian just alluded to, he would prefer the reserve leagues come back into it. And I remember, and this was just a handful of years ago because I was still playing, we were playing against the Rapids reserves in the Boulder Open League, which is practically now Harpo's FC. But at this point, which would you guys rather see?
I kind of go, it's really hard because I know there's a lot of supporters that, because of other leagues and the main leagues in the world, relegation is a big thing. And I think relegation would work better here only because America is so focused in its sports about college. I think the problem with doing a reserve team is that then you're competing with that college mindset, and the U.S. doesn't focus. Like in other leagues, you don't do that. It's not about, go to college and get educated and then come out and play at 22. You should be finding your talent at 16, 18 years old. And that's where I think the reserve team becomes a problem, because soccer doesn't earn enough here for the average player, where a reserve team earns you enough not to go to college.
Well, and speaking of that, of the younger kids, keep an eye on, there are a couple kids in the academy who routinely train out at the first team. I apologize for not knowing names. I think one of them, his little kid was Craig or Greg. I mean, they're constantly being praised while they're in training too, the little guys. So there's going to be a couple kids, I think, coming out of the academy.
Well,
that could stick.
As a coach, I coach for Monarch, and we play.
Quentin Pearson was the other one, I think.
Quentin Pearson. We play in the Front Range League, and one of the guys that we go up against happens to be Shane O'Neill's little brother, Mark O'Neill. And this kid, he's got some freaking talent. That entire O'Neill family is definitely proven.
Team and get rid of him.
They'll never come to the Rapids, though.
But, well, at this point, yeah, that's kind of, there's some, off the pitch issues between the dad and the Rapids in general. But you're right. There's definitely some youth that'll be making their way up. And there's a couple goaltenders. Don't be surprised if we happen to have a couple goaltenders come out of our DA.
That kid is going to Creighton.
Exactly. So, Rabbi, where do you stand? Relegation, promotion, or reserve league?
I mean, I think the reasons for promotion relegation in soccer aren't reasons about youth development. I think they're reasons about overall global competitiveness and parity in a league. But they're financially challenging. But I think and the major financial challenge there is MLS is making so much money with expansion fees. On some level, Major League Soccer has a promotion relegation thing. They just only have promotion right now. They don't have any relegation right now. So the question is whether that ever comes around. I don't know whether promotion relegation is great for making young players develop. In La Liga, you've got teams like Barcelona that have a Barcelona 2 that's at the second or the third division, and they just have a rule that they're not allowed to move up into the top flight. So I think that's kind of somewhat how MLS is treating USL right now, that it's possible that you can have a Sounders 2 team that you could make promotion relegation between USL, NASL, and MLS, and then Sounders 2 would say we're never moving up. It'd still be beneficial. It feels to me like the complicated piece that you guys have all alluded to is where does the NCAA fit in? Talking to Brian Crookham, talking to Potter Smith about this in a couple interviews this year, they're aware of it. They're really big fans of. Potter doesn't seem to think that college soccer is good for professional soccer in America. And Brian seems to think that if you can just fix NCAA soccer, you can make it more productive. Having either a fall and a spring season or an 8-month season, making these guys a little bit longer might help out.
I just don't. There's no way to make the college system really work because especially with soccer in a sport that is competitive around the world, the problem is all the other sports that America's really focused on are only American sports, or they're the best. So having that system is fine because everybody wants to play here. College coaches make as much as professional coaches, and that's just the way the system works. But soccer isn't that way. Soccer, the top players in the world get picked up at between 12 and 16 years old in these other leagues, and they start getting molded in training with some of the best coaches and best players in the world. You're seeing players that are starting in the EPL or BPL at 18. You're seeing them start for national teams or at least get minutes on national teams at that age. And you can't have players that can't get money offers stay in the U.S. because they're going to go, well, screw that. I'm going to go over and play in England, even if you're not being a starter, because you're going to earn more money and you're going to get more years out of your life. When you cut out 4 years of your professional career, that's a lot of time for someone that has to quit at 32 to 35.
Well, see, for me, I'm on the other way around of it, just because I played so much of my life as a player, and I left CU because they didn't have a real soccer program when it came to men's soccer. It was club. We were playing in Boulder in club. Like I felt like at that time, this was '96, my chance to play professionally or to move up was to go for an open tryout at Rapids, and you can't play collegiately and go to a club team or another club team or a professional club. Like NCAA kind of has their own relegation or their own rules as far as how things go. So I'm not quite sure if college can ever fix what's wrong with soccer as far as
it
goes.
Do it.
Because
it's not possible.
You know, you have somebody like me who is maybe a homegrown player who might be able to go so far, and I know where my potential is. It definitely wasn't MLS caliber, but I didn't know it at 18. And so as a player who knows he's got some promise but wants to play somewhere else that's like a D1 club, academically, you know, you have to make your choices, and there's a lot more involved. There, you know, it's not there.
Well, think about it like gymnastics. So the U.S. dominates in gymnastics, or at least this last Olympics, gymnastics for women. None of those girls are starting their career at 22. So you've got to think of it the same way. When you want to have that kind of development and you truly have the passion and the drive and the talent to be the top level at anything, you can't waste it by spending 4 years getting an education. And education is great. I'm not against education. But as a professional sports person, you just can't do it.
You have to make a choice.
Right.
Your prime ends so early. It's not like you get your degree and then you get to work until you're 60.
For the elite athlete, you guys are 100% right. And for the professional leagues, you're 100% right. Bobby Warshaw has said on the Howler podcast, though, he went to college and he's a little gun shy, and he talks to people who, you know, the guys on the Howler podcast got to interview Mourinho last week. So he's in these conversations with the highest of the high-level guys, but his position tends to be that it's good for the individual athlete to be able to get a 4-year free ride. And I happen to, you know, I'm family friends with the Rapids girls U18 goalkeeper, and she's about to get a free ride or a nearly free ride to a Division II college. Their family cannot afford college,
and she would be taking out thousands of dollars of loans otherwise. And it's a great thing for these kinds of kids to be able to do it. I agree with you that
you could have a professional team pay for that. That's my bigger point. Like, it's the rules and stipulations of not being able to be professional and go to college. If you made it where instead someone got to play for the Rapids from 18 to 22 and the Rapids paid their college tuition as part of their salary, you could do that with still allowing them to develop and play with the top leagues, because the
agreed. And I think we'll evolve in that direction.
Uh-oh. Going.
Here 100 years before we get there. And in the interim, there's a lot of guys who are getting a good free ride at UCLA and Virginia in the interim, which is okay.
So we went off on a little bit of a tangent. It's probably time we should look forward to the.
Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, the game this weekend
Never
against
bring
Portland.
up Burrell. Never bring it up.
Right.
We needed to. We haven't done it.
Yeah,
really.
that's true. How we made it this season this far down without talking about Pro Rel. That's kind of surprising. But let's look forward as the Rapids take on Portland at home, and kind of looking at this game. Portland's dropped a position. They've got something to fight for versus, we have a reason to win based on the fact that if we do win, we can actually finally secure the playoff spot, which we haven't been able to do for the last 2 weeks.
When we win.
So much prefer drama.
Right. So, looking at this game, Portland sits in 6th with 41 points. They've really kind of got to, for them, they need a win or a tie right now to keep the points going as far as keeping them in a playoff spot. As for us, 3 points here would help secure that second place in the Western Division and would lock us in with a playoff. With all the standing stuff aside, the Rapids they've only won 2 games out of the last 17. At some point, when do we sit there and say this team needs to win? Like, talking about playoffs.
I'll hit that point when we hit the playoffs and we do have to win. Like, I want us to win, and I think we need to for some motivation. But for me, as long as we make the playoffs in a good position, that's at the point where I'm like, okay, now you've got to win. You have no choice, and that really.
So what you're telling me,
even if we tied out, we would make the playoffs. We'd probably still be second, third seed, fourth. We tied out, so that's not terrible. I would love for us to win. I would love for us to actually fight for even a shot at the Supporters' Shield, and that would be great. But I'm not panicking until we lose. As long as we can keep it where we're not losing and we don't go on some losing streak at the end of the season, which would just destroy morale.
It's happened before.
Not against it.
And it's such a fine line with this team.
Portland is yet to win on the road this season. So this is a perfect opportunity to get a win. They are 0-9-6 on the road. So not only do they not win, they don't really tie 50% of the time. They just are terrible on the road. They have 46 goals on the season, which puts them 7th in the MLS. But they have 2 very, very strong strikers out of Adi and
Valeri,
with 15 goals and 13 goals respectively, which is combined nearly as much as the Rapids have had all season. But their defense is the 6th worst. So they've also let in 48 goals. So even with that kind of attackers, they aren't doing great, which is why they're really having to fight and swim as hard as they can for that last spot.
Holy crap! Their defense is just as bad as Chicago Fire's.
Yeah, it's not good, and we played them once this year to a 0-0 tie. Sadly, on Howard's first game on July 4th. Which I think all of us can agree was kind of a disappointing performance for a huge sellout crowd.
I think it also was a bit of a turning point. I don't think the Rapids have actually picked up the form they were in before July 4th since. So, if there's any time for the Rapids to kind of pick up that form that they had at the beginning of the season, now would be the time.
When did Jermaine go out?
That was it. That was the game that he allegedly got hurt in.
Coincidence?
Oh, partially. I think it has to do
Curious.
with Jermaine and Tim, to be honest.
I
That's
think it
just
has
my
to
own
do
personal opinion.
To
But
Powers continuing to start as an offensive midfielder.
Dylan, that's
so,
Austin. That's nobody else's opinion.
Hey, I'm not the only one that sees it. I'm going to point out there's quite a few people out there on the different forums saying the same thing, is that Powers is not an offensive midfielder. Look at it. Birch has just as many assists as a guy who's started more games in offensive midfielder than he has in any other position all season. And he hasn't put in a ton of goals, so it's not like he's scoring a bunch and not passing. He's just not doing anything offensively. So when you put Gashi or Jones in that position,
Dylan
we were
Powers
scoring-
hasn't done anything offensively since he missed the PK in Salt Lake 2 years ago.
it's just a poor
Or a year
position
ago.
for him. It just is. Gashi and Jones both had success when they got to start in that position, scoring basically a goal per game, or at least an assist and a goal per game, in all of the games they all started in that position. And Powers has done basically nothing, not even half of that. So you got to argue that role is the one, in my opinion, that Pablo gets wrong. Every other spot he's got people at, they seem to be at least close to the strongest top first or second person for that position. And that number 10 role, he continues to put someone who struggles.
Well, that'll change this weekend, so we'll see if
Yeah.
the difference it makes.
There's going to be someone different in that role because he's obviously, and this is based on just
Jones!
previous work and
No.
or not work, but previous games and what we saw at training. Powers is going to be lined up with Sam. So there's going to be a different number 10. Whether it's Gashi, I don't know. I would think so, but it was hard to tell. The way we saw things today, Pablo hasn't made up his mind yet whether or not that role is for Gashi. And he also isn't quite sure where Doyle's going to be. I feel like
Because he refuses to play Papa. So
and
who
Papa's
else
not
do
part of that equation.
He's still
No.
gonna. You still won't see him.
But who do you put in it outside of Gashi?
I don't know. I mean,
I don't even know. Who could you do? Even I guess you could swing Latu, but I just don't see that.
yeah. I mean,
You could
chance.
play Marlon there, and he would look like a second striker. But it's not the best. I think it's Gashi. It
I think
makes the
that's-
most sense.
I
He's
think
also
that's terrible if you're going to have Baji up top.
No, he was
You have-
giving
running it.
Gashi the looks. He was definitely wanting to see if he's going to do it or whatever. And I think that's probably everyone's best guess is to have Gashi back at that number 10 and Latu outside.
Yeah.
They've flipped throughout the year. They've flipped the wings, and also at certain games when Gashi played on the inside, he still kind of floated out to the left,
Yeah.
and that kind of shuffled that entire attacking midfield. So I would say that however they line up, it's entirely possible that you'll see a lot of switching and movement because all of those guys, Gashi likes to attack on the left, Baji likes to float out to the right, and he likes to 1-2, and Hairston likes to cut in, and they all they're all a little bit more fluid than Powers. Powers really plays centrally when he plays centrally. So I think it's a good question.
By central, you mean like the arc because he doesn't go into either 18?
Yeah, he's got limitations.
He does, and you guys have definitely nailed it, especially you, Rabbi, with how they play. Those guys play up top. And honestly, having a lot of movement up there is going to do nothing but help the Rapids as far as, Portland being able to defend that. And I don't see anything wrong with it because you're right. As long as you plug the right guys in that lineup and everyone can move into space, which is actually something that we heard Pablo talk about at practice today, about moving into space and getting into space and not leaving guys wide open. That's really kind of what is going to separate the Rapids from the Timbers this weekend. And going into my 3 points for, this weekend, point number one is finding some chemistry in that offensive third of the field. Those front four guys really need to work together. It doesn't matter who Pablo puts out in the starting lineup. We know it's not going to be Pablo, as much as some people may want it, although after the last game they may feel differently. That's fine. There's no argument there. But those four guys up top really need to communicate and work well together in order for the offense to just click, because the only way they're going to get 3 points out of this game is those four guys. We know that the back six is going to be solid. We already know who's going to be there.
Oh.
We know what they can do. And yeah, I mean, it's there. There's, everyone knows it, but the key to the game, and this is my first point, is the offensive four. That four, no matter who they are, just need to be on the same page. And then for my second point, it's executing. They need to be able to execute that and to, play wide, use the speed that you have. Latu's going to work off the ball. He doesn't have a lot of speed. He does need to kind of maybe pull the trigger a little more than he has in the past. And maybe that's just because, coming into midseason and the way he did off of an injury, and he Latu hasn't had the best season. So he might be held back a little bit in his own mind. That needs to go away. And then part three, protect the dick. We're the only team now left to have an undefeated record at home. It needs to stay there. No matter what, as much as we really want 3 points against Portland, we need 1 or 3 points. We need to protect the dick and keep that undefeated streak alive. All right, so that's my 3. Brian?
Okay, short and to the point. Keep the Marlon Hairston, Dominique Badji love fest together. I need to see them, keep that partnership going. Bring in, I think by doing that, they'll bring in guys like Gashi a little bit more, or at least allow them to get into some areas to be a little more dangerous. So keep it up, boys. Number 2, communicate in the back. We saw way too many instances where it was just a shit show inside the penalty area when it mattered most. And it was, just on goofy little plays, on small little overlaps, the ball would get behind. Just talk. They've been preaching how communication is the number 1 key back there, so keep that up. And have my third one, have a short-term memory. Everything's gone from here on out. Look forward, not at last weekend. Because all it's going to do is make you question yourself and think too much. Just go out and play.
All right, Austin.
On that note.
Are we not letting the rabbi have his shot?
Sure, yeah. What do you got, man? Any 3 points to this weekend?
For sure. Number 1, I'd say these guys played a midweek game in CONCACAF Champions League, and they started some of their regulars like Valeri and Nagby, and they brought on Adi, who scored both goals to win it for them. So expect tired legs. So run at them. Make this team tired. The second thing is this is not an experienced back line. They've got 2 guys, Stephen Taylor and some guy I literally never heard of named Zarek Valentin on the back line. They're filling in for a lot of injured players, including Nat Borchers and Jack Dewsbury. So those are problems. So exploit an inexperienced backline. And the last one is Portland has a tendency to get, especially Alvis Powell on the right at right back. He likes to run. He's really fast, and he likes to get upfield. He's very excitable. So get in behind that fullback on the left side. Exploit them when they get stretched out. Especially considering that back line is not really ready for it. So those are my 3.
Nice, man. I like it. Austin.
He's so much better than we are. So for me, the first one is defense needs to prove that Vancouver was a fluke, that we just kind of were off our game and we are the best defense in the league, and prove it again by pulling a clean sheet. which we can do against this team. My second point is offense needs to score multiple goals. I feel that you have the opportunity here. This is a team that struggles on the road, obviously, and we need to start showing we can score multiple goals in the run of play, because 2 of the 3 goals were, spots. So let's prove we can score multiple goals in the run of play. And I think if you allow Baji and Harrison to start again, and you have Gashi in that 10 role, you're going to see that. You're going to see more of an attacking style of play out of those 3, and whoever you put on the left really doesn't matter, whether it's Papa or Latu, to me. And my third point is the 12th man needs to show up, unlike Brendan. So we need to show up. We need to be loud. This is a team. Portland is used to a very loud crowd where they're getting the support. And we need to show, and they're bringing fans to this game. I know there's probably going to be around 70 people from the Timbers Army at the tailgate, and that doesn't include everybody they'll have inside the stadium. So we need to be louder, and we need to let our team know this is a home field advantage.
All right. Any final thoughts from you guys as we close this out? No? Anything else? All right. Well, on that note, we will end it. As far as I'm concerned, we got 3 points coming. We just need to go out there and work hard and earn it. So, yeah. Let's do this, guys. Bring the 12th man. Protect the dick. 3 points are not too far out of reach. Thanks for joining us. Check in next week.